sign. This week we're going to be talking about Virgo, everything you ever wanted to know about having a Virgo sun, Virgo moon, or Virgo rising, and just general Virgo information. We'll start with the basics. So this little guy is a symbol for Virgo. Now, the rulership of Virgo is actually a little bit tricky. In traditional astrology, in ancient astrology, and for most modern astrologers, the ruler of Virgo is considered the planet Mercury, and that makes a ton of sense. Mercury is the fastest moving of the planets. It's considered the messenger planet, and it has a relationship to writing, to communication, to perception, and it has an association with things like with logic, with reasoning, with problem solving, with analysis, with the mind, and all those other things. So we'll talk about those in the context of Virgo later on in the video, but it makes a lot of sense that there's these links between Mercury and the energy of Virgo. But there are a lot of astrologers who actually think that it might have a dual rulership, or that really maybe Mercury isn't even the ruler of Virgo. You know, the ancients, when they were studying astrology, they didn't have a sense of the entire solar system. They didn't know all of the planets, and so they assigned certain planets to multiple rulerships, right? So Mercury, for example, it rules both Gemini and Virgo, even though those signs are squaring each other. So those two signs are having an argument with one another. Those two signs are not the most compatible of signs, and yet one ruler is associated with both signs. And so there's a large contingent of modern astrologers who are saying, wait a minute, maybe Mercury is not the ruler of Virgo. Maybe it's one of these new planets in celestial bodies and things like that. And so the leading candidate for, the ruler of Virgo in modern astrology, for this contingent of astrologers who don't believe that Virgo is ruled by Mercury, is the asteroid Chiron. And I'm not going to go really in depth about it, but what I want to say is that Chiron is definitely, it captures some things about Virgo. It has an element of service to it. It has an element of sort of humility, of helping and supporting others. And those are all things that are encapsulated in the energy of Virgo. It has a lot of other dynamic, really interesting stuff about it, and I really recommend reading up on it. There's some really good articles on my website that you can take a look at if you want a little more information about Chiron. But there is definitely an argument to be made that perhaps Virgo is ruled by Chiron. The other possibility, which has not been talked about as much and is not as popular a theory by any means, is that Virgo could be ruled by the new dwarf planet Ceres. And that has a lot of potential as well, because Ceres kind of, it has a relationship to the earth. It has a relationship to humility, to service, to kindness, to compassion. But it also has this sort of brilliant strategic mind element to the planet. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in the video, but there's lots of potential options for what planet rules Virgo, and just cutting it down to the brass tacks, the jury's still out and we don't really know which planet rules Virgo. So it's important to sort of try the best you can to keep an open mind about which one it may be. Virgo rules the 6th house of the zodiac. The 6th house is the house of work. It's the house of health. It's the house of like day-to-day life. I kind of often refer to it as like the chop wood, carry water house. And it has a relationship with hierarchical relationships. So the relationships in the 6th house are like those work type relationships where like different people have very specific roles and there's a sense of hierarchy to the relationship. So all of those things come into play when it comes to Virgo, and we'll talk about them a lot more in depth through the course of the video. I want to just clarify, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what the 6th house is and what it means. But one of the things that is really important to remember is that the 6th house is not about the status that you get for the work that you do. It's about the actual work. So, if you take someone like a carpenter, for example, the 6th house is, represents the fact that he, goes to work every day, picks up pieces of wood and slams, nails into those pieces of wood to construct something and to put something together. If you're looking for the status or how people perceive his work or the accolades that he gets for the work he's done or how he's perceived in his greater community, you want to look at the 10th house. But if you want to look at the day-to-day work, the activities that happen on a day-to-day basis to make up how he contributes to the world, then you look at the 6th house. So we'll move on. The myth again. So the rulership of the sign of Virgo is hugely contested, and the myth of the sign of Virgo is also hugely contested. So I'm going to focus on one of the potential myths, but I'm going to list them all off in case anyone wants to look and research later. So there are people that suggest that Virgo has an association with Sheila, who was a goddess who had ears of grain and had a relationship with the harvest and with the earth. There are people who associate Virgo with the virgin goddess Tita. And so they look at sort of her purity and her virginity, and they look to her to describe the energies of Virgo. There are people who think that Virgo has an association with the goddess Aragon, who is a daughter of Icarus, and who was, killed as a product of his wrongdoings. Again, you can look these things up and find out a little bit more information. In the Middle Ages, actually, Virgo was associated with the Virgin Mary and the energy that she brought into Catholicism and things like that. But the most common, I would say, association between Virgo and mythology is that a lot of people link Virgo to the goddess Ceres, Ceres. And so Ceres was the goddess of agriculture, grain, fertility, and motherhood. She was essentially kind of like the goddess of the earth, and she had a very sort of deep connection to the earth, and part of the energy that she brought into this space was protection of the earth. So making sure that, all the creatures that were living on the earth were okay, and that the harvests were running smoothly, and all that kind of stuff. Roman etymologists, who are people who study language, thought that Ceres, the word Ceres, the name Ceres, was derived from from a Latin verb which meant to bring forth, to become, or to produce. And so, hence the association with the harvest, right? So, sowing the soil and reaping the benefits of the harvest, taking care of the land, and then benefiting from that work. All of those things have been associated with Ceres. The other interesting thing is that Ceres was the sort of patron goddess or protector of all laws, right? So she had a relationship with laws and rights, and basically following those laws that were set out by Ceres in mythology was sort of a requirement in order to have like a healthy and abundant harvest. Ovid, he speaks about Ceres, and he says that Ceres is content with little, provided that the offerings that are given to her are pure. And so you can see that there's like this association with the earth. There's an association with being the protectress of the earth. There's an association with creating structures and plans and steps that people need to follow in order to gain success or in order to contribute. And there's an association with this sort of element of humility, like only taking what you need and seeing yourself as part of something bigger than you. All of those things are associated with Ceres, and as you'll see throughout the course of this video, all of these things are also associated with the identity of Virgo and the kind of energy that Virgo brings into the world. Ceres, as a goddess, protected women in the transition from like youth and girlhood to motherhood. And we're going to talk about this later because, Virgo is so often called sort of like the virgin goddess. And I really think we misinterpret or misunderstand what that means and the context that we're using virgin in and why it's relevant and why it matters. And so we're going to look at all those things throughout the course of this video as well. Ultimately, Ceres has this like connection to the earth and with the mechanics of day-to-day living. And we're going to talk about that a lot, but there is going to come into this conversation a real energy of like the chop wood, carry water, like figuring out how to be present in the world, figuring out how to contribute to the world, and figuring out how to live day to day in the world and be successful while protecting yourself, supporting others, and living mindfully on the land that you inhabit. All of those things are going to come up in our conversation today about Virgo, and all of those things are tied into this energy of Ceres. And I think, the last thing I want to sort of say about Ceres is that this sort of energy of virginity, of purity that we talk about when we look at Ceres is related to her daughter Persephone. So Ceres had a daughter who was kidnapped and taken into the underworld, and she basically did everything that she could to create as much chaos as possible to force the hand of the person who'd kidnapped her daughter to bring her back to her. And so her daughter ended up spending 6 months of the year in the underworld and 6 months of the year on the land with her mother Ceres. And I think that that's where this sort of energy of virginity and maidenhood comes from, is not that Ceres forces you to stay in that place for your whole life, but Ceres sort of brings you back into that purity of spirit that you were before you had to experience the darkness and the challenges and the difficulties of life. And I think that Virgo is very much about finding a balance between the challenges that you're facing and optimism and idealism, and figuring out how to be both at the same time in order to make yourself better and make the world better. And we'll talk about that a lot throughout the course of the video. Now we sort of move into the earth part of it. So Virgo is ruled by the element of earth, and that has some interesting associations. All of the zodiac signs that are ruled by a particular element sort of speak the same language, they run similar energy, and I don't know, there's an ease to interactions between them. So Virgo, Capricorn, and Taurus, all three of those signs are earth signs. And what that means is earth signs tend to be a little bit slower processors. They absorb things on like a deep physical level, and the energy is released more slowly. They tend to be connected to the energy of experiencing life rather than interpreting or analyzing life. The challenge is that Virgo is an earth sign that's pretending to be an air sign. And I know that sounds kind of complicated, but Virgo, I feel like in some ways is almost like a hybrid sign, because it has this really airy energy to it. It has this energy of like analysis and interpretation, and this energy of the mind and of thought and of perception. And all of those things are wrapped in like an earth-like shell. So it's like trying to understand our physical experience of life. And like I said, it's a hybrid. It's has elements of both earth and air in the energy of Virgo. So we'll talk about just a little bit about Virgo sun. So the whole video essentially is going to be applicable to you if you're a Virgo sun. But what I want to do is focus on the kinds of questions that you should be asking yourself, or the kinds of things that you should be focused on throughout the course of the video. So to start with, the sun sign is who you are in stillness, when no one is around you and when nothing is affecting you. So it's kind of like your set point or your resting point. And there's a sense of, it's the purity of who you are in this life. And as a result, it's usually how you define yourself. And so when we look at the sun sign, we look at how people perceive themselves more than how other people perceive them. Even though you might see yourself in a particular way, that doesn't mean the rest of the world sees you in that way. Usually, if you want to see how other people perceive you, you would pay close attention to your rising sign or your ascendant, which are things that we'll talk about later. But for someone who's a Virgo sun, you want to listen to this video and sort of think about who you're capable of being, who you're capable of evolving into, because it's this really big, important part of yourself. And it's this really authentic part of yourself that lives in the energy of Virgo. And so now it's just about tilting and shifting and adapting that energy to run in the cleanest, freshest possible way. We look at Virgo moon. So the moon in astrology is It's about the emotional body. So it's how we feel, what makes us feel, and how we demonstrate those feelings to the world. And so if you're a Virgo moon, then you are an earth-based moon, which I think is important right off the go. Earth-based moons experience their feelings in their physical body. They're slower emotional processors. It takes longer to sort of dissect and understand their feelings. They have sort of a tendency, or more of a tendency, to sort of compartmentalize their emotions. And we're going to talk, I want you to pay particular attention if you're a Virgo moon. You want to pay really close attention to the section at the end where we're going to talk about when it hurts. Because basically the where's the ouch or the when it hurts section looks at what happens when emotionally you don't feel okay, when things are not going the way that you want them to, and where you feel, when you're hurt or when things are difficult. That section sort of talks about the behaviors that you're likely to exhibit when you're having difficult emotions. And so sometimes it's really good to know what types of behaviors to watch for, because especially when you have a Virgo moon where you have a lot of emotion that's sort of hidden beneath the surface or compartmentalized, sometimes your soul is trying to tell you that you're feeling something through your reactions and behaviors. So it's sort of pushing you into your emotional body through challenging behaviors that you exhibit in the that you're just exhibiting, right? So you want to pay attention throughout and look at how you can shift and pivot so that you're running that emotional, that powerful, dynamic emotional energy in a really clean, pure way that honors you and that honors others. And just be careful and maybe sensitive of what it might look like when you are hurt and when you are acting from a place of hurt. Move on to Virgo rising or ascendant. So rising and ascendant are two different words that mean the same thing. The rising sign or the ascendant is it's basically the sign that was on the horizon when you were born. And what it means or what it looks like, it's the lens through which the world sees you. So it's your personality, it's the types of behaviors that are most common in you, it's how other people perceive you, it's how other people perceive your behavior, and it's the thing that's most obvious about you when people first meet you. So, and I think there's sort of layers of getting to know each and every one of us, right? Like, so the more, if you know someone really, really well, you spend probably more time with their moon sign than you do with their rising sign. But if you don't know someone quite as well, then you spend a lot of time with their rising sign. So there's different sort of levels, right? And I think it's really important to recognize that who you are and how people perceive you are a product of all three things, your sun, your moon, and your rising, not one of them. And that all three of those things weave together to create the tapestry of who you are in the world and how the world sees you and how you view yourself. And so the rising sign, like I said, is your personality or how the world sees you. And so what you want to be really careful about it are two things. One, you want to listen throughout the video and see, the types of behaviors that might be obvious to other people around when you're not acting from a place of love, where you're acting from a place of fear, when you're finding things challenging, all that kind of stuff. Then you might be sort of edging into the where's the ouch section of the chart, right? And you want to look at how you can twist and pivot and come into a place where you're running Virgo energy in this really clean and pure way. And I want to say that that's not just altruism. It's not just me saying like, you should be shiny happy all the time. Like, I don't really believe that. I think we all have to experience all of the different emotions, and we all have to experience all of the different behaviors, and that there's not one that's better than all of the other ones. But what I will tell you is that when you run Virgo energy in a healthy way, it comes back to you in a healthy way. Okay? So you are going to attract people and circumstances and relationships that are much, much healthier and much, much more self-honoring if you run Virgo energy in a healthy way when it is your rising or ascendant. So the cleaner you run this energy, the better experiences that will come back to you, and the better experiences that you're just going to have in life, period. It's a really important healing process to learn to run your rising sign in as healthy a way as possible. So we're looking at perception. So I like this picture of the tree. I'm a big fan. A big part of the journey of Virgo is to understand, to analyze, to research, to learn to see the world. And I always say in my readings that one of the greatest skills of Virgo is that Virgo has the ability to see things exactly as they are, exactly as they could be, and the path that joins the two. And I think that's really important. Virgo doesn't walk through the world with rose-colored glasses, but it can see how it could be better, and how they could be better, and how their friends could be better. And there's something beautiful and honorable about that. It's, pure Virgo energy is a lifetime commitment to personal growth, and it's a lifetime commitment to helping others. So we'll talk about perception. So, how does Virgo see the world? So Virgo wants to understand this big, beautiful tree that you see in the picture before us, okay? So what does it do? It comes from the tree and looks at a single branch and studies all the bark on it and the fibers and everything like that about this one branch. And then it goes closer. And it studies a single leaf on that one branch in order to understand the whole tree. And then it looks at a single drop of water on top of that single leaf in order to understand the whole tree. And then it looks at the molecules in that single drop of water on that single leaf, on that single branch, on that large tree. And it learns to understand the entire tree by the tiny little pieces that are inside of those molecules. It understands the whole by understanding each one of the parts as an individual. And that's the experience of Virgo, to get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller to make things more manageable. And I think, it's important to remember as we're sort of talking about this, that there's beauty in that, and that it's a really high level type of knowing and type of perception, because at the core, all of the tiny pieces inside of everyone and everything are the same, right? We're all made up of, quarks and atoms and all this kind of stuff. And Virgo learns to see the interconnectedness of everything by looking at smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller pieces. And there's something very beautiful about that. Virgo energy is about, for science nerd that's out there, right? It's about fractals. It's about seeing patterns. It's about understanding how the little tiny pieces come together to form the whole. Now we're going to look at adulting. So one of my favorite scenes, I love the movie Matilda. I'm like a huge fan. I think everyone should watch it. And one of my favorite scenes in Matilda is where this little girl, who's like a magical little girl, she has this family who doesn't take very good care of her. And there's a narrator in the film who talks about her in this scene here where she's like 5 years old making her own pancakes. And the narrator says, Matilda learned what most people don't learn until they're in their mid-30s. She learned how to take care of herself. And that at the core is the energy of Virgo. Learning how to take care of yourself, learning how to feed yourself, learning how to, take care of your belongings, learning how to take care of your car, learning how to do the things that you need to do in order to make sure that you're okay and that your world is okay and that you're stable. It's the chop wood, carry water type of energy that comes with Virgo. And little things, we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but Virgo has a huge association with cleaning, right? Like intrinsically, on this deep spiritual level, Virgo understands the power of the space that you live in and how important it is to cultivate a space that honors you, right? So it understands structure. It understands how to create environments that honor you. Virgo, out of all of the signs, when it's running in a pure, healthy way, Virgo procrastinates less than any other sign. There's a task that's put in front of them. They complete the task and then they move to the next task, one by one by one, until the whole project gets complete. It's this willingness to take each step necessary in order to accomplish a greater goal. And so Virgo energy is about learning how to adult. It's learning how to do the stuff that needs to get done, even when it's not stuff you really want to do. And learning how not to procrastinate, and learning how to take care of yourself and to take care of others. And then I put this last picture here just because I think it's fabulous. And as someone who could use a little more Virgo energy, not that I don't have tons of it already, but I think a lot of us can use a little bit more Virgo energy. This is sort of, I think, this sort of great reminder that like adulting isn't easy, right? It's like sometimes you just want to throw your hands in the air, make friends with your couch and like eat a large pizza. And that's the opposite of Virgo energy. So Virgo is the part of you that doesn't let you do that every night. Virgo is the part of you that mothers you, that cares for you, that makes sure that you do what you need to do in order to be healthy and in order to be safe and in order to be cared for and provided for. And honestly, Virgo energy also tries to do that for everyone else. So Virgo has an association with the earth. So I talked about this, like I talk about association with the earth when it comes to earth signs a lot. And so I've already talked about Taurus association with the earth, if anyone wants to look at that video. And Taurus association with the earth is this sort of presence of being part of the earth and learning how to experience the physical parts of life. Virgo, on the other hand, Virgo comes at the earth from above instead of within, or from on top instead of within. Virgo energy is about, that energy of Ceres that we were talking about earlier. She was the goddess of the earth. She was the caretaker, the defender of the earth. And so Virgo energy has a really close association with that type of energy, that sort of like defender of the earth, that sort of, we need to take care of the earth the way that you need to take care of your house, right? You have to make sure that, nothing's growing on it that's going to hurt everything else. You have to make sure that everything's taken care of and protected so that future generations can benefit from the earth, right? So Virgo has an association. I looked at if you look at the left-hand side, it has this sort of caretaking element with nature to make sure that nature is provided for and safe and cared for. I chose a little dolphin tail picture because I think it's adorable, and some people taking care of a pelican, because I do think, I'm not saying all the time, certainly there are Virgos who are not environmentalists and who aren't super invested in the environment. It's totally true, but I would say that you'll find a lot more environmentalists who are Virgos than a lot of other signs. Virgo has this sort of connection to the earth and this connection for wanting to care for the earth. And if that's, making sure that animals are taken care of after oil spills, or making sure that, animals have safe ecosystems and environments to live in, or, monitoring what's going on in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, or having a relationship with, like the pictures in the bottom, like taking care of the environment, doing what you need to do or what you can do in order to help out, whether that's recycling or having a hybrid or composting or trying to eat organic foods or whatever. Like I said, I'm not saying anyone has to do any of these behaviors or anything like that, but Virgo has a relationship with this type of energy, which is trying to get the best from the earth and trying to convince everybody else to care for the planet that we live on in the best way possible. Yeah, so I want to talk about this because I had some I don't think I knew to look at it this way until I started doing this video. And I had this sort of rolling series of aha moments when it came to really examining what the Virgin meant, which I think was kind of cool for me. It was great. So, when I think of a virgin, I think, I have my North American lesbian woman hat on, and I think we all have those hats on. And I think as a feminist, this sort of reverence of virginity has always been a little bit uncomfortable for me. So I really struggled with what it meant. Like, what does Virgo the Virgin mean? And so I thought about it in like a totally different context, like I thought about it as like that part of yourself that exists before you've gone out and really experienced the world, right? So, that sort of virgin part of us is like the part of us that has an idea of what relationships should be before we're ever in one, and has an idea of what sex is before we ever experience it. It's the like 13-year-olds that are like, protesting for, I don't know, clean air, clean water, or the 13-year-olds or the 18-year-olds who are out on the campaign trails and trying to get people elected that are going to create better worlds, like it's that part of all of us that knows that something better is possible. But it's also that part of all of us that judges something or tries to understand something before we've experienced it. So it's fresh, it's new, we're not jaded, we haven't come to this place where the world has hurt us or broken us or changed us. And we have this sort of idealistic view of how things could be and what we could be and what the world could be. And I think, I have these pictures on the screen, on the left-hand side, the kids who are protesting for peace, and, I remember growing up, especially when I was like an activist in my early 20s, people always saying to me that I would grow out of my activism, and that, how many 60-year-olds are out there protesting because they accept the status quo, right? And sort of looking at you as being sort of naive because you're fighting for something. And I think there's this part of all of us that's still that like 16-year-old that believes that something better is possible, right? And I think that's the virgin part of us. That's the untouched part of us. That's the part of us that hasn't been affected by our experiences or jaded by the world or broken. And there's something pure and beautiful about that. And then on the right-hand side, I had this picture that's sort of, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I think that's the virgin part of us. That's the part of us that believed that anything was possible, that believed that, even if we came from a poor family, that we could grow up and be a CEO, or even if we came from a family of, I don't know, like bakers, we could grow up and, be a politician or be a farmer. You could be anything, and everything was possible because nothing was ruled out yet. And I think that that's the virgin part of us, the part of us that hasn't closed down to possibilities, that hasn't been jaded by life, that hasn't been hurt or broken or wounded, and is still open to the idea that the world is a playground. And I think that's a really beautiful part of us all. And so what I think about when I think about the virgin in the context of Virgo is sort of this ability that Virgo has to pull us all back into that innocence, to remind us who we started out as being and who we're capable of becoming. That part of us that's idealistic and that holds on to hope. And like I said earlier, it's sort of this energy of like the reset button. Virgo can see all of the ugly, squirmy, uncomfortable things about life, and all of the things that need to be fixed and shifted and changed. But there's this part of Virgo that connects us to the part of ourselves that knows that something better is possible and isn't jaded or broken down by the world. And so it's like, I think of it kind of like this reset button that allows us to see things as they are, but still hold on to hope that something could be better, that something could change. So we'll move on to the Virgo line. So, we talked about this earlier. Virgo has a traditional relationship with the planet Mercury. There's an association between Virgo and the mind. And I think I've chosen these pictures quite mindfully. If you look at the top right-hand side, there's little Scrabble tiles that say write, edit, clear. And I think that's a really nice way to talk about the Virgo mind. We often talk about or hear about Virgo in the context of writers. And that's true. Virgo has a relationship with writing for two reasons, maybe three. The biggest one is that Virgo knows how to create structure and paths that people can follow, right? So one of the best tools that a writer has is learning how to tell a story, learning how to set things up and structure things so that people can follow and identify and understand what you're trying to say. So there's a sort of this relationship between structured thinking and storytelling, right? And then there's also this relationship that Virgo has to editing, right? Like that ability to see things clearly, that ability to look at the details and get closer and closer and closer to something in order to make it better is really important for Virgo. I mean, some of the best editors in the world read books backwards so they don't get caught up in the story, so that they can see, homonyms, or they can see grammatical errors or punctuation mistakes or all those kinds of things. And in order to do that, you have to look at each word. You can't look at the entire paragraph or the entire book. You have to be able to look at it in pieces in order to make sure that everything is as it should be. So those things are really important when it comes to Virgo. And then, of course, Virgo has, that sort of dynamic ability to analyze and understand its surroundings, and so that has an association with storytelling and character development and writing as well. The picture right below it says Mary's father has 5 daughters, and then it lists them. It says what's the name of the 5th daughter. I put that on that first because I think it's like a really easy question, so I thought it was funny because it was I think posted under, if you can answer this question, you're a genius. But I also like it because it's like pure logic, right? It's like the most logical question on the planet, and very simple in structure and idea, and it's about details, right? It's about making sure that you read the first sentence fully, right, in order to understand it. And that's sort of the relationship with Virgo, is like making sure that you're taking in all of the information and moving. I think Virgo is also about learning how to move slowly. So Virgo has that brilliant mind, that fast, dynamic mind, but part of Virgo experience is learning how to slow down that mind and move at a pace where you're not missing any of the details in what you're saying. And then I have this little guy who's looking at books on the internet, and it says, and there's more, and a clear explanation of how the details are connected to my answer. It's perfect. Virgo's about structuring arguments. It's about considering all the details. And it's basically about figuring out how to weave together a whole bunch of details in order to construct a compelling and logical argument to change your opponent's mind. And then the picture, obviously Einstein is just awesome, and I like the picture of him. And then the picture on the top left-hand side is about code breaking and problem solving. And I think one of the things that Virgo is exceptionally good at is finding patterns and problem solving, and that's a part of the Virgo experience and the Virgo mind. Creating structure and planning. So, I mean, this is like one of those things that Virgo kind of gets made fun of for, it's always like, pictures of something that's like perfectly and beautifully organized in like alphabetical order and like all this kind of stuff. But that's part of what Virgo brings to the world. Virgo creates structure. So Virgo energy, when it's healthy and happy and shiny and fabulous, all the kind of stuff, is very like structured energy. It looks at where it wants to get, it looks at where it is, and it creates a plan between the two. And so the plan usually has activities and outputs and timelines and all that kind of structure to make sure that something gets turned from an idea into form. And I think that speaks to something sort of a little bit larger, which is that Virgo really is about grounding your ideas in the physical world and about taking the steps necessary to accomplish them. And part of that for Virgo is through the planning process, so that you can, get a sense of where you're heading before you head there, and also troubleshoot for potential problems along the way and all that kind of thing. And so Virgo has a very sort of structured, methodical approach to achieving goals. And so those are you can see there's some pictures about that. But the picture that I included on the bottom right-hand side, I did so really specifically. So it's like a kid on a trampoline. And the reason I included this is because I worked for a long time with this woman who had a Virgo rising. So she was super Virgo-y, and she said to me once that good policy should be like a trampoline and not a straitjacket. And it stuck with me. It stuck with me for my, ever since, right? It's this idea that like pure Virgo energy, clean, pure Virgo energy, it creates structures and policies and hierarchies and procedures and all of that kind of stuff with incredibly good intentions. It creates all of those things so that everybody is safe, so that everybody knows what decision they can make that's going to be the best decision for the whole, so that everybody has support and backup, so that everybody, if it looks like they're going to fall, there's something to catch them. And good policy and good structure is the something that catches them. It's not the thing that holds them back in the first place, and it's not the bureaucratic red tape. So Virgo at its purest creates policy and structure and plans, but it has the ability to diverge when necessary, or shift when necessary, or change when necessary. And we look at humility and service. One of my favorite astrologers used to say about Virgo that like Virgo's the guy that you call when you need to move. And it's true, right? It's this energy of service. It's the person you can rely on to help you when you really need help. It's the person that you can phone at 3:00 in the morning when, your car breaks down on the side of the street and you're scared and you're alone. Virgo is an energy of service. It's an energy of helping and supporting other people. It's this energy of community, and I think in so many ways it's what keeps us all safe. It's like, it's not the energy of family. It's the energy of people who work together, or even strangers helping each other and making the world a better place. And there's this element of community to it, and this sort of element that like when we come together, we're all stronger as a collective because we support each other. So hence the picture of the people moving, and the picture of the guy who's helping the little box guy up the stairs. And I really like the Mother Teresa quote at the bottom. So it says, "Never worry about numbers. Help one person at a time, and always start with the person nearest you." And I think there's something very Virgo-y about that, about this thing. It's not like helping because you want to prove a point. It's not helping because you're accomplishing this incredible, great purpose, even though you are. Pure Virgo energy is helping other people because it's the right thing to do. Not because of the credit you're going to get for it, not because of how it's going to affect your life, but because you just want to be of service to everyone that you can. And there's something incredibly noble about that. And that's what Virgo energy looks like when it's at its purest, is service to your community, service to others, and supporting and helping. So we're going to move into the where's the ouch section. So I talked about this a little bit earlier. Where's the ouch? So when signs run in shadow, which is what I call the where's the ouch section, it's the parts of us that sort of show up when things aren't going well, when we're really hurt, or we're angry, or we're afraid, or we've been driven into our emotional body in a way that's uncomfortable. These behaviors tend to show up as the ways that we avoid experiencing the discomfort that we're being pushed into, right? So they're avoidance behaviors, they're behaviors that come up from emotional triggers. Your sort of psyche telling you that something's not okay and that you need to heal in some way, or that you've been hurt in some way. And so the first where's the ouch with Virgo is perfectionism. So Virgo's known for this. I mean, like, it's this idea that like nothing is ever perfect. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Virgo sees things exactly as they could be, exactly as they are right now, on the path between the two. But it's really easy to get caught up in this idea that the only acceptable option is perfection, that nothing is ever good enough and no one is ever good enough. And it's this sort of energy of setting standards that are so high that they're completely unattainable, and then basically crucifying yourself for not being able to live up to those standards. And certainly there are some Virgos who project that energy of perfectionism onto other people, and we'll talk about criticism and judgment later. But in this context, when I'm talking about perfectionism, I'm really talking about the self, right? So this idea that you're never good enough. You're never smart enough, or strong enough, or productive enough, or enough. And so there comes into this sort of worthiness issue that you're never living up to the exacting standards that you've set for yourself. But in all honesty, no one could ever live up to those standards, because that's not, the human experience, right? So this sort of energy of perfectionism becomes a really big part of what the Virgo experience becomes. And there sort of comes into this really intense energy around like what it says about you every time you make a mistake, and sort of crafting your self-worth around your ability to be perfect and flawless. So I want to say that, like, it's okay to be a perfectionist. I think a lot of us struggle with those tendencies. But what's interesting is that we tend to respect other people the most when they're vulnerable. We tend to, when they have the ability to admit they're vulnerable and be honest about it and upfront about the fact that they're struggling with things, right? So what we value in others is the ability to be vulnerable and to accept that no one and nothing is perfect. And yet what we push ourselves to become is someone who never makes mistakes and someone who, never falls down, right? So it's about redirecting that energy and yes, trying and to be the best that you're capable of being, but forgiving yourself when you can't live up to the measure that you've set for yourself. I'd say that Virgo perfectionism, all of the where's the ouch stuff, they're going to hit harder for anybody who has a Pluto in Virgo. So you want to watch out for that. And anybody who has Virgo in the 12th house, or an intercepted Virgo. Okay, so if you have any of those things, then these behaviors are going to come up just really naturally for you. And it's really about honoring yourself through the process and not judging yourself too harshly for that. Where's the ouch? The cult of busyness. So this is like certainly not Virgo. We've just created and constructed this society where we've developed this sort of belief system that there's honor in being busy all the time, and that it makes you, it elevates you as a human being to constantly be doing things and to constantly produce. And there's a lot of things that have contributed to it. You've got longer work hours, you've got, increased, especially during the time of the baby boomers, when you had this huge population growth, you have this sort of energy where you had increased competition for jobs. And so this need to never be seen sitting still and to constantly be pushing yourself to produce is one of the biggest signs that Virgos are not okay. So I find particularly that with Virgo moons, it's this energy of, instead of sort of sinking down into your emotions and allowing yourself to feel them, that you pull yourself out through escapism in the cult of busy, right? In this sort of idea that you schedule every moment and you have 6 to-do lists and you're constantly producing. And I think that really comes down to the fact that there are a lot of people with heavy Virgo energy who wrap their self-worth around their ability to produce and to be productive. And I also wanted to bring up in this section just really quickly that one of the things that you have to be really careful of when you have strong Virgo running in your chart is this energy of the martyr. So this idea that yes, I'm busy all the time. I'm busy all the time because people are always asking things of me and I never get any time for myself and all this kind of stuff. It's like the soccer mom syndrome, right? Where it's you've got 5 kids and it's a Saturday morning and you're waking up at 6 a.m. and driving one to a sport. And by the time you've dropped everyone off at what they were supposed to do, you're picking them back up again. And it's this energy of coming into this space where you blame everyone else for, you martyr yourself by signing up all of your kids for all of the sports, and then you get angry that you don't have this spare time, right? So it's putting yourself in situations where you say yes when you mean no. And it's putting yourself in situations where you sign up for things that you don't have time for or you don't have space for, or that are compromising you in some way, and then becoming resentful of being in situations that really you put yourself in the first place. That's not to say that you shouldn't have incredible compassion for yourself. You put yourself in those situations in the first place because you're a loving, kind person who wants to help and support other people, right? So it's coming from an honorable place. But you do have to step back when you have these sort of moments with Virgo and say, like, you know, part of this experience that I'm having of this caretaking energy of Virgo is learning how to take care of myself, learning how to adult, learning how to parent myself, learning how to be okay. And part of that is stepping back from the cult of busyness and coming into a place where you make space and time to just be and just experience life. Where there's an ouch, criticism, and judgment. I think this one's hard for all of us. I think especially spiritual people, we just don't want to be judgmental people. We don't want to criticize people, right? But the where's the ouch when it comes to Virgo is that sort of like mean girl syndrome, right? Where you're kind of like looking all around you and finding fault in everybody else so that you don't have to face your fear that there's something wrong with you. And there's nothing wrong with you. So it's this projecting energy, right? Like this intense, powerful self-judgment that you have compels you to find fault in everybody else so that you feel okay about who you are. And it's really tough, you know? I think this is one of those things that I think, again, is really like, it's really cultural. It's really reinforced by our culture. You know, I mean, if you turn on the TV for more than 10 minutes, you'll hear someone getting criticized. You know, we love to build people up and tear them down. You know, I look at sort of people like, you know, Lance Armstrong, or even like, I think Oprah Winfrey got sued a long time ago. And the tabloids just went crazy, and even the news went crazy trying to, you know, tear her down and talk about how horrible she is, you know. And like the same with Ellen, you know, you're constantly stumbling on articles about, you know, negative parts of her, right? And so what we really like to do, I think, is tear people down. We find all the things that are wrong with them so that we can feel better about ourselves. You know, we do it with the Kardashians, we do it with 1,000 people. And the truth is that, of course, you're going to find fault in every single one of them, because there are things about all of us that need healing. But the truth is that there are things about all of us that need healing, and that includes everyone, even your idols, right? So it's coming to a place where you can realize that when things about other people bother you, it's because they're a mirror for you, right? So if it really bothers you when you see someone else being arrogant, then that's because on some level you're afraid of your own arrogance. You're afraid of being arrogant yourself. So you're projecting, you're finding other people who are exhibiting things out loud that you're hiding about yourself, or that you're afraid of about yourself, and judging them. And in some ways, it's sort of like how you repress yourself. It's how you remind yourself that you don't want to be that person that you're hiding. You don't want to be those parts of yourself that you've convinced yourself aren't okay. And we do that by finding things to criticize about other people, right? And judging other people and finding fault in other people. And not just other people, of course, it's also finding fault in situations and finding fault in experiences. But this sort of energy of ripping something to shreds, or ripping someone to shreds, so that you don't have to face the things about yourself that you're most afraid of, is definitely a where's the ouch when it comes to Virgo. And I've had this come up a lot with clients, and so what I tell them when they're having this experience is that you want to use that brilliant mind of yours. You know, Virgo is known to have just a brilliant, analytical, dynamic mind, and you want to turn that energy in a different direction, right? So you go from the space where like you're pushing outwards and you're finding things about other people to criticize or to judge, and you start with loving yourself, and not taking that on and not shaming or judging or blaming yourself for judging other people, because that's a vicious cycle you'll never get out of, right? So you start with total self-acceptance, with understanding why you're doing it in the first place, with understanding it's a hurt part of yourself and you have to nurture that hurt part of yourself. And then you flip this energy around, and instead of trying to figure out what's wrong with someone, you try and figure out how they got hurt in the first place. So, if you see that, Jenny is always trying to take center stage in the staff meeting, then instead of focusing on judging Jenny for trying to take center stage, you start trying to figure out what is it about Jenny that's making her feel like she has to prove to everyone that she's smart enough and that she's good enough, right? So you flip it on its head from this energy of judging other people to this energy of sourcing their wounds so that you can understand why they're behaving that way in the first place. And then once you come to that place, you can forgive them for their behavior and make peace with that part of yourself that you're afraid someone else is going to see, which is why you're judging them in the first place. Where's the out? Excessive structure and control. So this is a really prominent Virgo energy. Virgo is on an axis. So all the signs are on axis. It's doing something called an opposition to Pisces. That means that Virgo is further away from Pisces than it is from any other sign in the whole zodiac. And the energy of Pisces is about surrender and allowing. And so the energy of Virgo is the counter to that energy. And it's about structure, control, and procedure, policy, rules, all of that kind of energy, right? We talked about this earlier. Ceres was the goddess of rules, right? There was a very specific structure that she got people to follow in order to have a harvest, right? So it's a natural and an inherent energy in Virgo. And so when things are not going well in your life, a lot of Virgos, what they do is they just hold on to control so tight that their knuckles turn white, And the mechanism for holding on to control is, things like creating a set of rules and then expecting everyone else to follow them. Or, creating so much red tape and bureaucracy and structure and reporting that you come to a place where no one has a voice, where no one has any power, where no one has any individuality, because you're stuck in a very sort of regimented assembly line type system where you're stripping people of their ability to make decisions for themselves. So those are Virgo type energies, this sort of energy of like looking over someone's shoulder to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing and not trusting other people to show up for you. That's very Virgo, right? So it's very Virgo shadow, like when you're hurt, this is where it goes, right? So if you feel hurt and you feel powerless in your life, just like everybody else, you're going to find a way to deal with that. And Virgo's way of dealing with powerlessness is often to hold very tight onto control. And sorry, guys. So hold on very tight to control. And so for Virgo, that can mean things like micromanaging, things like creating structures and reporting structures and meeting structures that are so exhaustive and extensive that people don't feel like they have any agency, or that they're empowered to make their own decision, or looking over someone's shoulder, or telling your husband that he has to pick up the kids and then phoning him 5 times to make sure that he's actually done it, or that he's going to do it, or that he's on its way, or that he's filled up the tank with gas, or that he has the right car seat, or that they're wearing the right thing, or that he has a change of clothes, or that he's brought the diapers, or whatever, right? So it's like just giving someone something to do and not trusting them to do it. Giving someone something to do and then constantly following up and not allowing them to do it in the way that they need to do it. All of those things are the sort of where's the ouch element of Virgo. And again, you don't get out of Virgo by becoming something else. You get out of Virgo by learning how to use Virgo energy to your benefit. So in this case, you get out of that energy by finding things in your life that are within your control and taking care of them. Finding structures that are in your control and taking care of them. Get out of it by making a to-do list around your house, but not things that everyone else has to do, what you have to do, right? You get out of it by learning to create structures that make you feel comfortable and you feel safe without forcing other people into those same structures, right? And that's not to say, we talked about this earlier, good policy, good procedure, good structure should feel like a trampoline. It supports, helps everybody, right? And it sustains businesses and it sustains home environments, like there's a reason that chore wheels exist. It's so that everybody has, does their fair share, and so that everybody can depend on everybody else, right? So it's not that structure is bad, it's just important to make sure that it's a trampoline, right? And that it's helping everybody and not hindering everyone. Where's the ouch? Anxiety and catastrophizing. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on this, but I will say that Virgo spins mentally. So like it's this sort of energy of like obsessive kind of like, oh no, I did this, how is she going to react? Oh no, I did that. It's going to turn to, oh no, like for example, oh no, I said something horrible in a meeting. My boss hates me now. Oh, she totally hates me. What if they're going to fire me? Oh my goodness, if they fire me, I can't pay my mortgage. If I can't pay my mortgage, I'm going to have to get a smaller house. How am I going to get a smaller house? How am I going to, afford to get the moving truck to my house? I'm going to end up on the street, and then my parents are going to be really disappointed in me, and they might not even see their next birthday. So it's like this constantly, like, it's just a downward spiral that never stops, right? So it starts with one small thing that you've done, and then it ends up you obsessing over how everyone is going to respond, what it's going to mean, and what it's going to turn into. And it blows it up from this tiny, tiny little thing into this catastrophe that you can't possibly fix, right? And this is sort of like the energy, and I'm saying this because I have a lot of Virgos in my life, and this is the energy that compels you to write the text at 3 a.m. to tell your friend that you didn't mean what you said, that you really meant something different, and that you love her and she thinks she's fabulous. So it's this energy of like constantly, worrying so much about other people's perception of who you are, and worrying so much about how everyone is going to take everything that you've done, and how everyone's going to judge you and criticize you, and this need to be perfect, that you create a life where you don't get to live anymore because you spend all your time worrying about what's going to happen as a product of you not being perfect. So we look at sort of this anxiety and this catastrophizing, and Virgo energy, like I said, I don't want to come to this space where I tell you to not be who you are, right? So part of learning to process anxiety is to lean into anxiety, right? It's not to like, it's not me telling you to wake up tomorrow and never care what anyone else thinks of you ever again, or not want to be a perfectionist. It means leaning into anxiety, letting yourself feel the anxiety, and then digging into why you feel it in the first place so that you can heal from it, right? So it's about not running away from what you're feeling, and digging deeper and deeper into the source of those feelings, and using it to sort of analyze where that emotion comes from so that you can heal the source instead of continuously trying to numb the symptoms. So then this is the last slide. We look at possibilities. So, we talk a lot about the where's the ouch thing, and I just really want Virgo, I want every video I do to know, but I want you to know there's just this extraordinary possibilities for Virgo. That I've got this picture on the top left hand side that's really sort of this image that I have of like the Virgo as the caretaker of the earth, who's like really honoring the land and the planet and helping it survive and sustain so that it can be passed on to another generation. There's this sort of like element of caretaking for that, and then not just caretaking of the earth but caretaking of others. I mean, Virgo has this beautiful, gorgeous, nurturing energy. They're the person that shows up, and that's such a big deal, and they're the person you can count on, and the person that you can rely on, and the person who, I don't know, I just think those are all really, really beautiful qualities. And I think you honor every single person that you meet when you show up for them. And I think you honor every person that you meet when you are able to see the world as a community, and where you're able to see the world is bigger than just you, where you're a piece of the whole, but you're not the entire whole. And I think that's the sort of beauty of Virgo energy, is realizing that you're one of us, that we're all, part of each other, that we're all connected to each other, and that when you help each other, you help the world and you change the world. I think that's really a very noble and beautiful energy. And I think if you look in history, you will find, some of the most extraordinary humanitarians are strong Virgo energy. It's this energy of like helping, supporting, and changing the world in a myriad of ways. I've talked about the environment a few times in this video. That does not mean that all Virgos are environmentalists. There's lots of different ways that Virgos help. Sometimes it's whatever your cause is, right? It can be helping your community, it can be helping your family, it can be helping in a charitable context, it can be being a helper in business, it can be lots and lots of different things. So there's no need to narrow that or limit yourself. And then on the bottom right hand side, I have this picture with the woman and the elephant, and I put it there for two reasons. One, I think Virgo has a heart connection with nature, and I wanted to encapsulate that. But the other thing that I think is really important is that Virgo has this energy of like compassion and empathy, and this ability to see yourself and other people and see other people in you, like this ability to see the interconnectedness of us all, this ability to see how we're all related to each other, and this ability to help and support other people and to really show up for them. And it's not just other people. Often with Virgo, it can be animals. It's a connection to the earth. It's a connection to nature. It's a connection to animals. And it's a willingness to put yourself out there and to help and support whoever's put in front of you. And there's something beautiful and incredibly noble about that. And then on the bottom left-hand side, I have the guy with the gears going in his head. And I did that for like two reasons. One, I think, and the most obvious being, is that, Virgo is known as having a very brilliant, strategic, analytical mind, right? And I've talked a lot about how Virgo can, see things how they are, see things how they're capable of being, and see the path between the two. And that takes this ability to have linear, logical thought, and this ability to see all the steps involved in making things happen, and the structures involved in making things happen, and then to get out and make things happen, which is the picture on the top right hand side. So it's the mind, it's the thought, it's the and then it's sort of that coupled with this willingness to actually do the work involved in making things change and making things better and shifting and changing the world. And I think those are all really important things. And then the other thing about the photo that I really like is that I think Virgo is really well supported by this image of like gears, right? It's like all these sort of moving pieces that are put together in just the right way at just the right time in order to propel us all forward. And I think that's what Virgo is about. It's like stringing together all of us so that we can move together as a community and as a world. And to make things better. And it comes down to that sort of Mother Teresa quote, which is that, like, you don't worry about how many people you help, you just help the person that's put in front of you. And there's something really lovely about that, because, as soon as you help that one person, then you immediately, it creates, waves, right? And that person has a different relationship with everyone they see that day, and that person has a different life, and that person can help other people, right? So it's this, Virgo has this brilliance inside of it, this sort of wisdom and this understanding that something that may seem small and inconsequential can change the whole world. And the only way you can access that is to make sure you do what's right in front of you when it's right in front of you, and to live your life mindfully, and to chop wood and carry water, and to do all of that kind of stuff, and let the big picture come into being on its own while you take care of the details. Thanks for listening. This is Bonnie with Heal with Astrology.